Now, banks and other financial institutions are preparing for a series of cyber war games to prevent and prepare for serious cyber attacks. To look more at this and other issues, I spoke a short time ago with the Home Affairs Minister Clare O'Neil.
Cybersecurity is national security for our country, and it was disappointing to arrive in government 10.5 months ago to find that after having no cybersecurity minister and an outdated strategy that didn't get implemented, we were very far behind where we needed to be. So there is an absolute power of work being undertaken at the moment to prevent cyber attacks and to make Australia a hard target against them. But what Australians need to understand is that even if we get to best in the world, which I truly believe we will, and even if we do all of the things that we need to deter cybercrime in Australia, we are still going to see cyber attacks. And part of us being a nationally secure country is being able to get back up off the mat very quickly when we're hit with a cyber attack. So what the Australian government is doing is starting something that business have called for and asked for, which is for us to collaborate with industry to run large-scale national cyber exercises. So what that means is that we will essentially design a set of scenarios that might be cyber attacks, for example, on banking and finance. Perhaps we model what would happen if one of our big banks went offline for a period of time. How would the government work and how would the sector work together to make sure that while that technical incident was being resolved, the impact on Australian citizens is as minimal as possible. So it's a really important thing for us to be doing, and we're starting that fairly soon with banking and finance.
Latitude Financial have said they're not going to pay a ransom. Do you think, as a government, should you make it illegal for companies, given how counterproductive ransoms are in this context, should it simply be made illegal?
Yeah, so it's a really important question, and can I say with regard to Latitude, it is a firm position of the Albanese government that we urge Australian companies not to pay ransoms. When you pay a ransom, you are paying a criminal and giving them proceeds of a crime. What we've seen with Optus and Medibank and Latitude is when ransoms are not paid, the word actually gets out in the crime community, and people are talking about the fact that increasingly Australian companies will not support cybercrime and the proceeds of that crime to flow to criminals. So it's very important that we try to stand strong on this as a country, and I'm supportive of what Latitude has decided to do. With regard to the policy question, it's complicated, Kieran, and the reason it's complicated is because there are times when that the costs of paying a ransom or not paying a ransom are different. Think about a ransomware attack which locks down a major hospital system when it might be the only one servicing a particular regional area. So that doesn't mean that we shouldn't proceed. It's just that we've got to think this through really carefully, and we're having really good discussions with business at the moment about how we can help create an environment where ransomware payments are very, very unusual. That's what I'd like to see.
Okay, well, on to a few other issues. The ISIS brides, the first cohort repatriated last year. Have you got an update for our viewers on when the remainder will be brought back to Australia?
Yeah. So, as you described there, a decision was made last year to bring to Australia 4 women and 13 Australian children who were in a camp in, all Australian citizens who were in a camp in Syria. We don't have any current plans to repatriate more Australians, but I want people to understand that the circumstances on which we make those decisions are entirely about national security. We need to make a decision about whether, on a case-by-case basis, it is safer for our country for those children to be growing up here with Australian values versus living their childhood in a camp where they're exposed to extremist ideology every day. So these are the evaluations that we make, but there's no current plans to bring back further groups from that cohort.
The ASIO boss, Mike Burgess, had expressed concern when some of the information was made public prior to the repatriation happening. Have you followed that up?
Well, Kieran, I don't have a comment on that one. There was an AFP investigation put in place, and I'll let the AFP undertake their work.
All right, let's move on to a few other issues now. The voice to Parliament, the opposition leader says that it's not having or won't have the necessary impact in places like Alice Springs. He spent the last few days there and talks about the real crime crisis that is unfolding, along with Jacinta Price, his coalition colleague. This position is very much hardening against the voice to Parliament. What's your reaction to the way the opposition is running on this issue, which would likely make the referendum much more difficult to succeed?
Look, I'm incredibly disappointed, Kieran, and what I see is Peter Dutton essentially treating this like a run-of-the-mill political exercise where he can try to divide the country and score points on the government. I mean, how utterly depressing that that's the best the opposition leader can come up with. What the Prime Minister is asking our country to do is something powerful and meaningful and thoughtful, and that is ask a question about how we bring our country together to solve what are really significant issues in Aboriginal communities and how we can do that as one country. It is a meaningful thing for our country to ask citizens to decide. Ultimately, it's not about politicians, it's not about Peter Dutton, it's not about me. This is about Aboriginal Australians asking government for two simple things: recognition in our Constitution and merely to be consulted on matters of government that affect them. And the fact that he's campaigning against this, I think, reflects pretty poorly on him. Our focus is on the referendum ask of Australians and making sure we're really clear about what's going to be put before them later this year.
Julian Leeser quit this week, the Liberal spokesperson on Indigenous Australians and the Shadow Attorney General. He's quit. There are others with concerns. Should the government try and embrace the likes of Leeser and Liberals with those, I guess, an openness to vote in support and to support the referendum by making some amendments to really shore up their position?
Yeah. I mean, I think what we're seeing here is that the opposition leader's got this, only one way of doing politics, and that is to divide people and create conflict. The Prime Minister's style is actually completely the opposite, and the way that the PM has approached this from the very beginning is to try to bring everyone into a big, broad tent. Australians want to see reconciliation with Aboriginal brothers and sisters. That is the future of our country, and the PM is trying to map a pathway there that brings the country together. Now, we had always hoped that this would be a bipartisan arrangement with the Liberals. They have chosen a different path, but I can tell you I will sit down with Julian Leeser any day of the week to talk about how we can make sure that we've got really broad support for what is fundamentally a meaningful but not particularly radical change to our Constitution. Recognition, consultation, that's what it's about.
And finally, I know, like many of our viewers, my heritage, non-English speaking, and part of our family, over many years in the migration, this country and its multiculturalism, they've got a lot of challenges before them. One government service that helps them is the translation service, the telephone translation service. You've announced a permanent position for some 50 of those translators today. Can you tell our viewers about that?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Kieran. So Australia is such a big, beautiful, multicultural country, and lots of our citizens are second or third or fourth English language speakers. And it's really important that a country like ours provides a way for people who don't have English as their first language to use the services of government. So the people that work in this amazing part of my department in Home Affairs have been, too many of them have been put on casual labour hire contracts, which means that, they can't get a home loan, they don't have sick leave, all these sorts of things. And today, the Immigration Minister, Andrew Giles, and I have announced that 50 of those employees will be moving on to permanent contracts. So we've been here today talking to some of these incredible people about the work that they do, and it's a change I'm really proud to be a part of.
Home Affairs Minister Clare O'Neil, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kieran. Really appreciate your time.